All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We're going to see members trickling in over the next 5 minutes, but we're going to go ahead and get started. And thank you so much for joining us here at the Alumni Society for the latest installment of our microlearning series for members, by members, and designed to bring you actionable insights in a very concise Q&A format. I'm Vianney Lubis, for those of you who I've not met, Head of Audience and Engagement. Today, I'm stepping in for Christina Merrill, our dear Communications and Community Manager who leads this incredible series. And Carlos, it's truly a pleasure to welcome you here to our micro learning series. Carlos has been a longtime member and valued friend of the Alumni Society. In fact, since our very first year in 2015. And I have to call it out because as we're approaching our 10th anniversary, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you and thank you for your continued support and contributions to our community, including this very conversation. Carlos is the executive coach at Coaching Gravitas, helping top executives refine their leadership and their presence. And I'm going to let him share a little bit about his background in just a moment. But first, Carlo, again, thank you so much for being with us.
On the contrary, thank you, Vianney. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to see you again. And it's nice to see so many members joining us.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And before we dive in, a quick housekeeping note, if time allows, which we definitely believe that it will, and we want to open up the floor to you all for audience questions. So feel free to drop your questions. You can do so in the chat. You can do so in the Q&A box. I'll monitor those as the conversation unfolds, and then we'll do our best to address them. So let's go ahead and get started, Carlos. Let's dive in. I want to start by having you tell us a little bit about your professional background.
Sure. Very quickly, my background combines line management, strategy consulting, and executive search over 4 decades. My first decade was at Pfizer's manufacturing division, New York City headquarters, the Brooklyn plant, the Puerto Rico plant. My second decade was at Booz Allen in the operations and manufacturing strategy group, and they took me to South America, to Europe, to Mexico. So I was privileged to live
Wow.
and work in those places in addition to the U.S. And over my past 2 decades, I've been in executive search, based in Los Angeles with Korn Ferry and with Heidrick& Struggles most recently. Last summer, I launched my executive coaching practice to help executives with career transition and leadership development. So it's from these perspectives that I hope to contribute to our conversation.
That's wonderful. And career transitions, advice, tips, tricks, those are all what we hear most from members really seeking, especially in these times. So you've obviously been doing this for a long time. From your perspective, how has the landscape changed when it comes to recruiters who are specifically looking at executives to fill C-suite roles? And what are the major trends that you've seen over the years?
I think the major trends reflect the hyperconnectivity and data analytics that surround us. Um, the and in fact, these trends probably started in 2007, which is the year that LinkedIn reached 10
Mm.
million users. They're now over 1 billion in more than 200 countries. So it's fascinating what LinkedIn has done to the world of talent acquisition. So three trends come to mind. First is recruiters are processing much greater candidate volumes. They're using information technology, um, and so they're just the pipelines are enormous when you compare it to, I don't know, 30 years ago, it was the old Rolodex approach, if anyone remembers. The second trend is uh, hiring companies are less open to compromise when screening candidates. They are insisting on ever higher standards, believing that with the increased volumes in candidate pipelines that they will find that needle in the haystack. And the third trend is that there's been huge growth in internal talent acquisition teams. So uh, pushing away external recruiters, companies are hiring their internal talent acquisition people, and they're using LinkedIn and other databases to do executive search on their own. So that would be my summary of the trends I'm seeing.
Interesting. You talked about those ever and high standards that companies or recruiters are looking for. What would you say are what are companies looking for today when they're recruiting senior executives?
Yeah, well, we've all seen job descriptions, position specifications. They are long, they have long lists of requirements, but fundamentally, every search has just the key selection criteria. These are the must-haves, the minimum requirements, and they appear both in terms of expertise and experience. So, expertise is that mastery of those critical disciplines in a function, in an industry, in a region. And experience is the scale and scope of how and where you exercise those areas of expertise. So it boils down to just that combination. No matter how long the job description is, a good recruiter should be able to boil it down to the critical expertise and the necessary experience. That's it.
That makes sense. And everyone's career journeys is so different. So if you meet those minimum requirements, does it matter how you got there, would you say?
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Progression matters. Progression matters, as does follow through and execution. Recruiters are looking for promotability and accountability. They want to see that a company has moved you up based on your performance, and that at the same time, you've been accountable for those results. You've stuck in long enough to see things through.
Interesting. So on that note, for progression, what would you say successful career progression looks like today, especially obviously in this economy and in this world, the post-recession world where professionals haven't necessarily enjoyed the job security that they had 20 plus years ago? What would you say is that successful progression looking like?
Yeah, that is a great question, Vianney. Very timely too, given the economic environment in which we've lived for the past few years. So job hopping is viewed negatively, but less so if explained by downsizing or restructuring, which is, out of anyone's control. Careful though, neither is a 20-year tenure at one company entirely favorable, because such long tenures offer little, if any, evidence of adaptability to new, different corporate cultures. I recall a 3-3-3 rule describing attractive career progression in C-suite candidates, the highest levels of leadership. That is three promotions at three companies over 3 decades. I'll repeat that. Three promotions at each of three companies over 3 decades. That signals that you are promotable, that you are sought after, and that you've been learning Agile for 30 years.
I love that 3-3-3 rule. I'm summarizing it. I'm putting it into the chat. 3 promotions over 3 companies and over 3 decades. That's super interesting. Very memorable too. What else do you think, would you say successful candidates need to be attractive candidates for recruiters and companies? Obviously, specific to C-suite roles.
Well, yes, we spoke about the minimum requirements, the must-haves, the experience and the expertise. Um, Above and beyond that, then recruiters and hiring managers are screening for the all-important leadership characteristics. These are agility, impact, innovation, transformation. What's important about these is that C-suite candidates need great examples of where and how they have demonstrated these attributes. So, uh, where agility is concerned, it's how have you adapted resourcefully? How have you overcome failures? How did you simplify complexity? For impact, it's how did you drive growth? How did you restructure operations? How did you disrupt markets or channels or supply chains? For innovation, it's how did you challenge the status quo How did you foster experimentation? How did you craft future state strategy? And for transformation, that's important. That's the follow through I mentioned earlier. You need to have good examples of how you built new capabilities with the people, processes, system, how you inspired teams across functions, across geography, and how you made those ever-present critical trade-offs in for smart resource allocation. Now, these examples require very careful tracking over the years.
Hmm.
They require thoughtful preparation for each interview. So I would urge senior executives to go back over their career history if they don't have it top of mind. Make sure they dig back for those best examples, bring them forward, summarize them in a manner that allows you to respond quickly when the unexpected call may come.
It's great advice. Thank you. And Carlos, Diana Hernandez did put a clarifying question, so I'm just going to ask it now. On the 333 rule, just to clarify, is this three promotions in one company? So a total of 9 and 3 decades, or one per company?
No, it's three promotions at each of three companies. So imagine you spend 10 years, so straight out of grad school or business school or college, you start at one Fortune 500 company. Um, After a year, you're promoted. After 3 years, you're promoted again. After your sixth year, you're promoted a final time. Some other company comes calling 10 years into your first company. They attract you for new and bigger opportunities. And then the same cycle repeats itself. You're promoted two or three times at that company, and then a third company 20 years into your career comes to recruit you. So I hope that clarifies the point.
That's great. Thank you. And yes, I'll just remind that we're going
Yeah.
to turn it over to questions soon. So feel free to drop it in the Q&A, which I see someone else did, or in the chat here. So Carlos, let's resume with our questions super quickly. Can we talk about soft skills? What soft skills do you feel are important to demonstrate?
Um, well, soft skills are very important because hiring decisions are made on intuition more than on logic. So think of those human qualities that build interpersonal connection and inspire trust. The traits most often mentioned are integrity, authenticity, empathy, transparency. These can perhaps be grouped under emotional intelligence, but also important are perceptual intelligence and situational awareness. So this is what comes through in the process of the interview.
That's great. And on that note, if you could give, one tip, what tips do you have to your fellow members here tuning in live, or who will watch this recording later, in their quest to find that C-suite role?
There's an old adage, which is you don't find the job finds you. And that's a reflection of reality, which is you can look for months with zero response. And when you least expected, you're contacted for an opportunity you could not have anticipated. So try as you may, it's unlikely you will find a job. Uh, just invest that effort in making yourself findable.
I love that. The job finds you. How do you make yourself discoverable? What would you say?
Yeah, so if you think of the visibility tools at senior executives' disposal, there's no question LinkedIn is the most important for executive visibility. Your LinkedIn profile should be correct and compelling. Posting is not necessary, but clarity certainly is. Another road to visibility is participating in professional associations and industry conferences. And it's nice if you can be a speaker or a panelist, that raises your visibility. It also gets your name on more.
Think we lost Carlos, but we'll wait for him to come
Custom,
back.
your favorite suppliers, channel partners, consultants. These are people who would otherwise assume you couldn't be interested. I won't even mention search firms because they will find you when they need you. So you don't need to worry about connecting with search firms. Besides, search
Interesting.
firms participate in less than 30% of C-suite placements. It's 70% likely your next opportunity is going to come from this network or internal talent acquisition people looking through LinkedIn.
Interesting. That's a very fun fact there. Well, on that note, let's talk about marketing collateral materials. We talked about LinkedIn obviously being an important component. Are there any specific collateral materials that you would say executives need to have ready and clear if they want competitive C-suite candidate to be a C-suite candidate?
Yeah, I think it's most helpful to have um, three items ready to go at a moment's notice when you get that call. So you mentioned LinkedIn, of course, that has to be clear, up to date, compelling. There's the executive bio and there's the executive resume. Um, what I found over many years is that the best LinkedIn pages are written after an executive invests concerted effort to craft an exciting bio, a bio that really sings, a bio that conveys passion and purpose, a bio that builds a vision of the natural progression that a career is pointing towards. Now, um, I would also say that while an executive resume is typically 2 pages, a 3 pager is okay.
Mhm.
uh, what many executives do is they have a 2 page executive resume, and then in case necessary, they have a longer format resume because that's often helpful to support the due diligence that's required for C-suite placements and also board placements.
I was going to ask you number of pages because that seems to come up quite a bit. So finally, our last question. I know you mentioned it's an interesting statistic of 30% of recruitment will come for C-suite roles, may come from an executive search firm. But what tips do you have for building good relationships with recruiters? What do you like specifically, or did you like for candidates to do?
Oh, very simple. Just please be helpful when contacted. Even if you're not interested in the roles that you hear about, you may have referrals to offer that
Mm,
gets you in their good graces. Send them your bio, send them your resume for future reference in their databases. It can only enhance your visibility and certainly cannot hurt you. Please don't fall for that false loyalty trap with your employer.
great. Perfect. Well, Carlos, thank you so much. I want to turn it over to you all tuning in. I have one question already. So we will field some questions from the audience. So Carlos, the first question I have is anonymous. What are the chances of transferring from senior executive roles in the public sector to senior executive roles in the private sector? Are those crossovers possible? Very timely question.
Yes, they are possible from the government sector to the private sector. They are possible from the nonprofit to the for-profit sector, but it depends on how specific the experience and the expertise is. So if you think of some of the functional disciplines, they lend themselves to such transference across sectors, not just across industry sectors, but the public, the nonprofit, and the for-profit sector. So think of procurement or accounting, perhaps, human resources, perhaps. It's
Mhm.
the business building, the customer facing, that it's those roles that may be less transferable. So I guess the answer is it depends, but it's not impossible. It's difficult, but it's not impossible because hiring managers are always looking for the most natural transition.
Sure.
And if if you may not rank high in terms of the specific experience because of the um, public sector, you can overcome any disadvantage that may represent with very strong soft skills.
Going back to the importance of those soft skills. Yes.
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. Well, any other questions from anyone in the group for Carlos here today? We'll give it another minute or so. You can drop it into the chat or into the Q&A. I see one here. Okay. Hugo, you joined late. No worries. Yes, we will be sharing the recording. So, your question is around getting in front of the right people and getting on the radar for executive level roles. Recommendations around doing so internally, externally, and what role the resume plays.
Yeah, well, the resume is the the final step in the process. You should deliver the resume when invited to do so, and that could be several steps after your initial outreach. Um, Mentors with whom you may have lost touch years ago, but who you know are still fans of yours. They can be great points of initial contact, letting them know you may be feeling stuck. You're wondering if there's an opportunity to transition into something new and different. They are wonderful at helping you with your strengths inventory. They can say, yes, I remember your strengths were A, B, C. Now that I know you're interested in making a move, let me introduce you to these following people. So you can initiate a network by reaching out to people you trust. I mentioned earlier your favorite customers, your favorite suppliers.
Mm.
Consultants are often very well placed to make immediate referrals. So a consultant may have just implemented a new system, I don't know, a warehouse management system, and the client asks them, do you happen to know a great VP of logistics and distribution? And so what you don't want a consultant who knows you to assume that you're too busy and that you're just heads down. So let them know, seed the pipeline of inquiries, but just letting them know you might be receptive. And often in industry networking events, especially if you are a panelist at a conference, those are great opportunities to raise your visibility and you can find yourself being contacted afterwards.
That's great advice. I have 4 questions for you, Carlos. They're coming in. So we got 6 minutes. Let's start with, do you have any advice or tips for individuals who have not had C-suite positions, but have the experience and the qualifications?
Well, that's where the career progression comes in. And it is not a matter of title, it's a matter of scope and scale of responsibilities and reporting relationships. So if you are an SVP reporting to a COO, that might be less impressive than if you are a senior director reporting directly to a CEO. So think of
Mhm.
reporting relationships, span of control, the complexity. So if the question implies that you can have a lot of experience without necessarily having the C-suite title, that's absolutely the case. And recruiters don't just look at titles. They look at those elements I was just describing because there's you can have an executive director at one company making more money than a vice president at a
Mhm.
and so recruiters look for salary and compensation, which is a better indicator of level and scope.
Interesting. Yeah, titles vary so much across companies, but industries, you name it. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't know if you have a different answer to this, but I will ask this for Diana. Deanna, what are the most common gaps of candidates when transitioning from VP to C-suite roles?
It's often in the softer skills. they've gotten to where they are based on their technical skills. Um, and the challenge in becoming a leader of leaders and then even a higher level leader of multiple leaders and multiple divisions and multiple geographies is that success there seems to depend on these soft skills, your self-awareness, your situational awareness, your emotional intelligence. It's in many cases it's getting out of your head and into your heart and really leading uh, from your whole person perspective. Those are the qualities that will inspire teams to move. Those are the qualities that will get teams to overcome their resistance to change. It has nothing to do with technical skills at that point. It's all about these soft skills.
That's great. I have a question from Giovanni Jerez. Informational conversations. The question's around informational conversations. What's the best framework for initiating and conducting a one-on-one with another executive at a target company?
Oh, that's very difficult. That's very difficult. Um, and if it happens, it'll be because you touch a human element of trust. So think of gratitude. Um, More senior executives are flattered when asked for advice, and they are grateful for the opportunity they have then to pay it forward, so to speak.
Mhm.
So if you can express your interest, not in terms of looking for a new job, but instead um, asking for advice or, hey, I admire your career. I've been following it. Do you have 15, 20 minutes where I could pick your brain? I'd love some advice. So it's that mano izquierda, so to speak, no?
Love that. That's great. I have a question here on what importance do you give to internal networking in the company you are specifically interested in?
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
get her.
no, and just the last piece is what are your suggestions to make those approaches more effective? Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I mean, yeah, don't underestimate the power of self-promotion, but you don't want to do it like those self-promoters. So there has to be a way. So I think Giovanni's question might be relevant here also. So
Mhm.
the same networking you use for advice outside of the company, that's much more easily available internally. So I don't know, let's say you're coming up the ranks in one region and you see someone 5 years ahead of you in another region, reach out to her and say, hey, I just love what you've done at this company. I need to pick your brain. Please share some tricks of the trade. And so network internally. Don't just stay in your box and wait for the annual appraisal. Really, and networking is the wrong word. Really, it's about connecting. So if you don't want to go to a networking event, walk away with 10 business cards and zero conversation, right? Go to the
Mhm.
networking event, connect with the two most valuable people you can meet, and then you'll have a friend for life.
I love that. And that's great advice for our leadership summit. Building meaningful relationships. That's what it's all about. We have time for probably one more question. So I'm going to ask this very last one. What triggers a company that's looking for an external candidate versus a homegrown candidate?
Due diligence, it's responsible to check the external market while checking the internal talent pool. And it does great things. If the internal candidate is promoted, it sends all the right signals.
Mhm.
Internal promotions are always better when viable. If the external candidate wins, typically there should be sufficient uh, difference in experience and performance and ability so that the internal candidate won't leave. That, he or she will understand, oh, I can continue learning from this new leader. This person is infusing a new and important perspective to I'm going to stay and keep learning. It When done well, it works well.
That's great. Yeah, no, that's super important. Well, Carlos, thank you so much for being here today, for sharing these amazing insights. You have really great experiences that I know our members are loving the wisdom. So, how can members get in touch with you?
Easy. My website is coachinggravitas.com, and my email is carlos@coachinggravitas.com.
I'm gonna drop that into the chat. All right, there's your email, and of course, I'm sure LinkedIn as well. Well, to our audience, thank you so much for joining. And I always like to share if you're interested in sharing your knowledge and insights, because the series is built for you, by you, and joining an upcoming session, email us at members@thealumnisociety.com with your ideas. And I want to plug in our next session, which we're speaking with Silvia Banderas Cofine on March 4th on supercharging your career with an executive coach, the secret weapon of high performing leaders. I'm sure you can attest to that too, Carlos. So the link to register is in our events page. So be sure to check that out. Thank you so much for joining us, Carlos. So good to see you, and to all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks again. Bye for
Take
now.
care.